Psychosis is a blinding vision of reality and its experience. The experience of psychosis. Psychosis is the projection of psychic realities onto the world. It is a colouring, a realising of the world based on the psychotic state of mind. In bipolar psychoses, psychosis can take on two forms: manic psychosis, which occurs during mania, and involves, according to psychiatric conventions, delusions of grandeur, elevated mood, elevated self-esteem, and other similar symptoms, as well as depressive psychosis, which occurs during depressive episodes, and inversely involves paranoid delusions, hallucinations, and other similar symptoms. Though psychiatry may term experiences like these as delusions, indicating their falsehood or unreality, the experience of psychosis is often precious, and indeed important within the worldview of the person who has experienced it. What I mean here is not that a psychotic individual relies on his psychosis to interact with phenomena truly, but rather that the experiences of the psychotic individual are instrumental in shaping their worldview even during times of lucidity or euphemia. The experience of depressive psychosis is misery and suffering, especially if moral dilemmas are involved. Persecutory delusions occur, leading to paranoia and outright visual hallucinations. Limbs physically become heavier, speech is impossible, and all will is sapped by the psychic state. Though these consist of the physical or technical symptoms of psychosis and depression, I shall now conduct a philosophical overview of the psychic state itself. The experience of depressive psychosis is not bad as opposed to good, neither is it suffering as opposed to pleasure. However, it is both bad, suffering, and even misery in the context of being unholy, profane, and demonic, as opposed to the calm bliss implied by holiness itself. It will thus be useful to define the holy, and then extrapolate the feeling of depressive psychosis from its opposite. Rudolf Otto, in his Das Heilige, or the feeling of the holy, stated that it consisted of two aspects. The first was fascinans, a transfixion of the mind upon the perfection of holiness. The second was tremendum, or the gravity of experience which marks the experience of the holy. It is without doubt that the experience of depressive psychosis is the inverse of the two aspects, becoming, or being perverted into, fixation and oppression. The first of these aspects are characterised by the fixation of the mind upon the terrible, on the sinful, the unclean and the impure. What I mean is that the mind is unable to repress or resolve memories of moral dilemmas in a healthy fashion, which now, fixated upon by the mind, are given a new breath of life, and then extrapolated and expanded in magnitude and gravity, where the fascinans of the holy washes away all suffering and transfixes or transfigures the psychic state into one of bliss. The fixation of depressive psychosis inversely washes away all feelings of bliss or resolution, and transmutes instead the psychic state into one of disgusting terror, guilt and suffering. This fixation then leads to, and is oftentimes worsened by the second aspect, oppression. Where the tremendum of the holy gives one the thoughtful gravitas of wisdom, the oppression of psychosis absolutely crushes the sufferer, for he is now burdened by his fixation. He is in complete darkness, his bones are broken and his chest is smashed, physically felt as pain in the abdomen and heaviness of the limbs. The fixations, once they have reached the height of their power, after some time, become actual shadows seen following, feeding off the paranoia. In essence, beings of hallucinatory quality. This dark psychic state is the absolute inverse of the holy. It is unholy, beyond profane, unclean and impure. It is the leper not even Christ would want to heal. There is nothing but an eternal silence and distance and eternal scream. Death would be welcome, but a fear that death is impossible for him is also real. Death would not choose to release such a leper, nay, for he shall live and suffer forever. Truly, he who hath tasted this, have tasted hell. Psychosis of the manic kind is not as easily described. It is apt, however, that we use Hermetic language in our description of it. The axiom, as above, so below, is most useful in our purview of manic psychosis, the sense of connection with the entirety of the universe, without any division between space and time, literature and philosophy, even theology with mysticism. It is thus a sense of rising, ascending to a point where all things are able to be viewed from above, and thus become one. This oneness is then projected onto the self, the below, connecting the ascending self with that which is observed. However, the inverse is also true in the very same experience. What is meant here is that while the above, referring to the unification of the external world, is projected onto the below, where the below refers to the unification of the psychic and intellectual faculties of self. The inverse holds true simultaneously. The unification of the external universe is only ever observed as so due to the internal unification of their own psychic and intellectual faculties that they experience. There are thus two streams of reality, or substratums of experience, which are happening concurrently with the psychotic experience. And it is this awashness of all things that the manic perceives. It is this same highly kinetic force that propels the person to all heights, seeing all things and perceiving all insights. The kinetic force is radiant, connecting them as well to all times. Much as the experience of universal phenomena is seen in macrocosm until it is a singularity, similarly, the linearity of time is seen in macrocosm until it is a single point of experience. Therefore, the potentiality to rise becomes infinite. The psyche has, in a sense, arisen beyond the body. And thus the psychotic abandons sleep and food, which is ultimately what shall weigh him down again. No man has seen what he who has been given this gift sees. No man shall know the divine mania of he who hath been chosen. The state of mania is more akin to the states of consciousness we observe in oracular phenomenon. What I mean here by oracular phenomenon is that strange state of being which comes about when the consciousness of a person is displaced and taken over by another separate consciousness. Such phenomenon have occurred in various parts of the world, and especially in antiquity, where we see the examples even in the West, such as the Oracle of Delphi, in the East, such as the Oracle of Siwa, and in the Far East, where the Nechung Oracle of Tibet survives up to this very day. In such oracular phenomena, a medium provides the human vessel by which a spirit of subtle form can interact with the physical world of gross form. In short, the human consciousness of the medium is displaced from within the body, and the body is taken over instead by another consciousness, be it spirit or deity. However, the question arises, where does the original consciousness go? Reports of oracular phenomenon clearly state the unconscious state of the consciousness of the medium itself, implying that the consciousness is either fully or partially displaced into the surrounding gross matter. It cannot be displaced into the plane of subtle matter, since if the consciousness, itself subtle, was displaced into the plane of subtle matter, then it would surely be conscious of its experience there. However, the unconsciousness of mediums points to the fact that the surroundings it is displaced into requires a gross medium for interaction, indicating then that the only possible environment into which the consciousness is displaced into is the immediate gross and material surroundings of the physical medium. How then does the displacement of the consciousness relate to the experience of psychosis? It has been stated above that mania, or manic psychosis, is perceived as a unification of self with the universe. And this has been demonstrated to happen in actuality, when the consciousness is partly the body of the manic, its consciousness thus existing at once within the bodily medium and within the universe. Thus, the consciousness at once within and without perceives itself as at once unified with a universe of intense reality, and since it partly lacks the gross medium by which to interact with its immediate environment, is dissatisfied with its surroundings as markedly unreal or phantasmagoric. Mania is thus a state of consciousness which is heightened and augmented to the point of displacement, and it is this that allows for the manic to perceive his surroundings in such fashions described previously. Psychosis as an experience of time. In both depressive and manic psychosis, I have touched upon experiences of time. In depressive psychosis, it was mentioned that he who hath tasted this, hath tasted hell, due to the eternity and intemporality of the suffering, which is perceived in the experience of said psychosis. However, in the experience of manic psychosis, time becomes a single point of experience. These are in fact two sides of the same coin, like the two-headed god Janus. The experiences of time here are merely the same phenomena, but looking or extending into the opposite directions. The resolution or common phenomena which lies at the basis of this experience of time is this: the folding of time itself. Imagine time as either linear or circular, existing on a single plane, like a line or a circle which is drawn on a piece of tissue paper. Now imagine the plane, or tissue paper, crumpled up. There will surely be points of the line or circle which now touch and intersect with each other. Thus points, or whole sections in time, become concurrent with one another, completely unified, as in manic psychosis. Or the current period we experience happens to loop back onto itself, repeating endlessly, as in depressive psychosis. This bending or crumpling of the plane, upon which we experience time, is a marked sign of the experience of psychosis, whether or not it is depressive or manic. It is this which is experienced as eternal hell for the depressive, and as a single unified point of experience for the manic. And since it's common to both, it is basic and signature of psychoses of any kind, forming a worldview based on unity of self and experience. In our age of reductive science, one might dismiss the experiences of the saints of old as manic psychosis, or their deepest spiritual agonies as depressive psychosis. However, it would be more apt to say that manic and depressive psychosis give one a rare insight into the true mystical experiences of the saint. We must keep in mind that the psychotic state is one of hyperrealization, where the psyche is acting to the point of projecting itself onto phenomena, and indeed phenomena onto it. Thus, as much as it is a state of hyperreality, it is also a state of hyperphilosophy, in the true sense of the word sophos itself. The psychotic does indeed experience the world around him, and his own self, as more real or hyper-realistic than one who is not psychotic. But at the same time, the world is made unreal, or like a fantasy. The world in self is at once empty of all being, and yet the self spills out onto it. There is a strange isthmus of being, for as much as the self is projected onto the phenomena is simultaneously projected onto the self. This isthmus between self and becoming is indeed being, or a kind of totality, for it is the oneness of reality, the realizing that all things are the same substance, only with different forms, and via this commonality unites through all space and time. But in the state of psychosis, such a statement is no statement of knowledge, but is the very isthmus of being experienced. It is real, and as such, not mere theory to be put into words. Thus, the systemization of the experience demonstrated throughout this entire article can only be done retrospectively during a stable and lucid state. One must be prepared to be disappointed, for merely reading or recollecting psychosis will not bring about the psychosis itself, but rather the feeling birthed from such a worldview brims with the feeling of the immensely tragic. It is tragic as, although one is the ultimate reality of being, one still perceives the fracturing of self. And thus this disjuncture between being and perceiving gives rise to the realization of the ultimate powerlessness of man. As much as he is capable of being one with all things, the same individual which can do so shall always remain individual. This is unquestionable fate, the unique tragedy of the universe. It is a feeling greater than the crashing waves of the sea, and yet gentler than the softest rays of sunrise. It is the ultimate filling up of the soul, spilling over into tears, and yet is also its emptying. A distribution of pity and compassion to all beings. It is this feeling which is the experimental aspect of the worldview stated, and it is this which brings beings to the very horizon of their being.